set a reminder for all observers to speak in the corridor at all times. Make sure not making any gestures or noises and interfering with debaters and speaking. Also make sure that you leave and enter the room only when exchanging with speakers. I think that's all. I wish all the teams best of luck. On the motion, the House prefers a world in which moral enhancement is compulsory for prisoners, welcoming first proposition speaker to open the debate here.
Am I audible this way? Okay. Then, before I start my speech, know that whatever I say in this debate does not is not associated with what I'm thinking. It's just for the purpose of debate. Right then. Okay. I'm gonna start my speech in 3, 2, 1. The case of Junko Furuta, known as Japan's most heinous case of sexual assault. Yet, the perpetrators right now, after finishing their service in prison, they're just lurking, rampant, committing the same crimes over and over again, sexually assaulting girls. We think that the CGS has ultimately failed, and we think that the only way that you're gonna get a better world is on on-site proposition. But then, moving on then to few pieces of setup. First is in terms of burden. I think just to frame this debate in a clear method, I think what we have to prove to you exactly, we identify 2 exact metrics. That is under which side of the world that we are able to fulfill the CGS principles that ultimately fulfills the state's values and the state's protections. But ultimately, that also then will fulfill a better world for humanity where everyone can be safe and sound, regardless of whatever is happening. But then second of all, is in terms of the mechanism, I think I just want to make this bio enhancement mechanization clear. I think that it's safe to fiat that under our side world, it means that this is a clean slate debate where we prefer a world. It means that this technology probably has existed probably since for far too long, that people will that likely we don't think that there will be any backlashes, that we think that people are gonna reject this kind of technology and whatnot, that we think that they're gonna protest it and whatnot. But then second of all, we think that it's very fair to assume that probably because that the state is gonna apply this we're gonna make this technology compulsory to all these prisoners. We think it's very likely that this technology is probably kind of safe and probably already tried and tested for many times. I think that that's probably what the state is gonna make sure that this kind of technology is safe for everyone to use, right? But then third of all, what do we think that these bio enhancement is gonna look like under our side of the house? Understand that under our side of the house, this bio enhancement is to use to heighten the moral compass of the prisoners itself. Like, what does this look like? It means that they're gonna start thinking that they're gonna start thinking that the actions that they previously do, the crimes they previously do, is probably so bad, and probably they're gonna start feeling super duper remorse. And we think that this is only exclusive under our side of the house because notice that on-site opposition, what they have to prove is exactly why they under their side rehabilitation and stuff like that has failed so many times that people don't really understand why it's exactly that their actions is probably so guilty. And this is probably looks like probably the reasons why maybe how under their side of the house remorse is probably not felt so much often. You can see the cases like corruptions and stuff and whatnot, but like you see like politicians or maybe like people just like committing like corruptions and stuff and whatnot, they probably don't understand, they probably don't feel the remorse of actually already stealing the state's money and actually already making like so many people like feels stuff like that. But then we also think that probably what this also looks like is probably of how under their side of the house, most likely they're like serial killers and whatnot, who probably have like some sort of like personality like disorder or something, and their side of the house, that it's gonna be so hard for those people to kind of feel remorse. But under our side of the house, we think that this kind of thing can all be actually like tackled and whatnot. But then third of all, it's in terms of the CGS principles. I think what you have to understand is that these CGS principles ultimately cannot cater to everyone. That ultimately what it has to do is that it has to cater to the state's value the state's interest, that you have to ultimately protect anything that actually violates the state. So you cannot give like any, you cannot, so opposition cannot just like nitpick some examples where like CGS cannot be fulfilled, well, like the CGS kind of like failed some certain like individuals and whatnot, because ultimately we think that the CGS has to be able to cater only to the state's interest and the state's value, right? That ultimately are.
What do you say on the accessibility of this exact raw bioinvestment? Do you believe it's going to be expensive or cheap?
I think that it does not. I think that every state will have the capability and have the capability to purchase that kind of technology, and that I think it's very safe to fear that that technology is going to be applied to everywhere in the whole world. Where like no matter what prison you are, it will still exist in any kind of prisons. Right then, moving on. Two things in my speech today. First is in terms of why it's justifiable, in terms of it protecting the state value. But then second is on how the three impacts that we're gonna give to you. That is, we're gonna lessen the multiple offenders, but then we're gonna also increase the self-trust in TCS, and we're also gonna ultimately protect the people. The people. But then, okay, moving on. Firstly, in terms of principle, I think what the premise is simple of how you're able to protect the state's value. I think that when you violate the right that the state has given to you, the state has the state has also has the right to take that away. We think that this looks like, for example, you stealing, you fraud, you committing frauds and whatnot as a citizen. We think that just because of you do that kind of like criminal actions, we think that the state has the very right to take that, probably the sort of like what opposition is trying to play, probably like dignity of like the people and how they're like their moral compass is gonna be changed. Like, we argue that it's fine even if you probably the human's dignity is like actually lessened under outside of the house when you try to change their moral compass and whatnot, because of what you violate the right that the state has already given to you. But then even then, on second of all, we think that once you actually already commit the crime, once you have the guilty intention to commit the crime itself, you already know that you're already committing a crime. It means that you violate the state rule, you violate the state's value and whatnot. It means that you have the right to also be taken that specific right under your side of the house. But then what exactly that is the manifestation of this specific crime? Within under our side of the house, within that, first of all, is in terms of like deterrence of how under our side of the house comparatively, you're able to get prisoners who actually realize that they're actually guilty, because under their side of the house, even if they're gonna try to claim to you, oh, actually rehab exists, but then notice that of how two things here. It's exactly because of how rehabilitation has felt so much under your side of the house that right now the prison, the ex-convicts themselves are still running rampant and are still committing repeated crimes and committing repeated crimes on their side of the world. But even second of all, what you have under their side of the world, you have like people constantly like cheating the system and whatnot. Like for example, once you have the money, once you have the power, you kind of see all those people actually committing those crimes. They just literally don't care, and that's the burden that they have to prove under their side of the house. But then moving on on the more practical manifestation, we think three things here. Firstly, in terms of like we are able to in terms of recidivism and stuff. The premise is simple. The reasons why like multiple offenders exist is that they don't feel the guilt, is that they don't feel the remorse to actually understand why is it that their crime is so bad. But then under our side of the house, when you just like heighten these people's moral compass and whatnot, you make them understand that the actions that they commit is actually just so bad. Like this is something that is like super lacking under their side of the house, and it's something that the burden they have to prove. But then likely under our side of the house, when you get this technology, you're able to heighten these people's moral compass and whatnot. This is we think that how likely when people get out of prison, they're gonna be able to turn into better individuals. It means that they're gonna be better, they're gonna likely not be able to commit the same crime for that sure. How committing crimes is actually creating sense of guilt. Committing under our side of the house, when your moral compass is heightened, you understand that your actions previously done is something that is so bad. You understand that it probably harms lots of people. That's how these moral compass actually help these prisoners actually understanding that their actions is so bad. It means that likely under our side of the house, the prisoners will feel so much remorse and probably will not likely to do the same actions over and over again. But then second of all, is on how we're able to increase the trust in CGS. The reasons why, the premise is simple. Under their side of the house, the burden that they have to prove is exactly why is that in their world, there's still so many multiple repeat offenders of like very heinous crimes that corrupt politicians are still able to probably run for legislative and something just because that people because they can easily just like cheat the system based on like the money and like the power that they have. But understand that on our side of the world, the people that actually violate this kind of like state values and whatnot can all be kind of like whenever their moral compass is heightened and stuff and whatnot. We think that under our side of the house, we're able to sort of like mitigate all those sort of people because we're actually able to make them understand that their actions probably harm like so much more people, which lead to our third impact, which are we are able to better protect the people from the from the repeat offenders that is actually going back to the society itself, because under our side of the house, the people understand that, oh, they're so guilty, and that their actions is so bad and harm so many people, and that's why we think that this is how we're actually able to better protect the people protect the people where like after the prisoners like get out of the prisons and whatnot, which is why under our side of the world we give you more trust in TGS, we protect more people, we also refuse the form of recidivism and stuff.
Confidence figure with that reach. Now I call on the first opportunity to start to take from object.
Okay, let's stop at the scenario where there is sexual assault happening in Japan, for example. The moment where you become the victim, the moment when you see those people that's getting brainwashed by the moral injection, for example, that is scattering all over the place, that is still going in your society, for example, in the sense that they're still being brainwashed, in the sense that they still did the victim, that they still did the action that you've done to you, and the sole reason on why they're released by the prison is that only they get the moral injection is the fact that the proposition loses in this debate. Firstly, though, on rebuttals, I think this is most important in this debate. The fact that most prisoners are already morally good in the first place is the fact that the propositions don't realize. I think there's no urgency in all about why do they actually make this to be compulsory. How would they make this to be mandatory for our prisoners, for example? They're actually not given a choice of actually doing the harm itself. For example, when you see people that in majority of the prisoners, 90% of the prisoners in this world, probably just doing it out of necessity, for example, out of how they could provide for their family, how they could stole, how they could steal from the rich, for example, to provide for their family, for example. I think this is inherently bad. How will they justify about how will this actually morally justify to apply this to everyone when they are still morally good in the first place? But firstly, though, several points of rebuttal. I think aside of that, I think there's no proportionate amount of crime will still be accounted in their house because of the no other mechanism. I think 8 minutes of the PM speech, and they still didn't provide any other mechanism instead of the compulsory bio injection, for example. I think this is still harmful. Why is this still harmful? Because firstly, there's no likelihood on how this is going to be happen anyway. There's no likelihood on how about the prisoners will be guilty. There's no likelihood about how the prisoners is going to actually just be better for society after all. I think the feeling when later, please. I think when there's no proportionate amount of crime, for example, I think that the idea of death sentence, life sentence, and the rehabilitation that exists in our society is still going to be the same proportionate amount of crime that still be accounted in our society. You also failed in bring closure. You also failed to bring deterrence in the victim itself, which is very important if you're actually talking about the principle of criminal justice system with the proposition we really want to talk about, right? I think the fact that also the cheating system, the corruption, it is still symmetric in both sides of the house, is that you can still cheat the system about how you won't get the moral bio injection, for example. I think it's symmetric. Why do they even debate about this? I think their side failed in their case. I think thirdly though, I think guilt and remorse will not be gained in their side because how will they know when their actions are going to be bad? For example, when you're brainwashed, when you suddenly being having more empathy, when you suddenly being more honest, suddenly you treat everyone better. I think the idea that they will feel more remorse, they will feel more guilt is more happening in our side. It's still not happening in their side. They still don't realize why their victims are, which is why we're very proud to oppose this debate. But firstly though, how is this proposition grace really bad? Firstly though, I think the idea that deterrence of closure in the principle of criminal justice system exists the moment when you actually just release the serial killer, for example, or the sexual assaulters, like what the proposition really want to visualize in this debate is the idea when you finally getting out of jail, for example, you meet people that hurt you, you meet people that kill your child, for example, and they're suddenly being good, suddenly suddenly being good, suddenly treat you like, suddenly treat you with honestly, for example, suddenly treat you with a best person that you ever met. I think this will be really harmful because you will not feel peace. You will not feel like, oh, this is the people that hurt me earlier. Oh, these are people that killed my baby. But suddenly he's being good. Suddenly is actually just being following the norm of society. I think you will not feel that. I think you will still hate that. I think you will still be insecure or still being not feeling safe within the people in itself. I think people are not going to like them in the first place. But thirdly, though, I think about this itself. I think there's no urgency, firstly, and secondly, the burden is very big about how neurodegeneracy and closer. Okay, please.
But at least at the end of the day, don't we just stop them from doing it in the very first place because they have a moral compass now?
No, I think that it is not a fiat for you to say that it will not happen in your side after all because of the existing stereotype and the society in itself. Because how you see people like, oh, you're only nice because you get the bio injection, for example. You're only nice because of the people that making you to be like that. I think it's harmful because when you treat them as it is, you will start to feel like you will start to be feeling more dependent and feel more dependent on relying on the bio injection in itself. I think this is very harmful. But secondly, though, move on to my next thing up to my argument about the closure in itself, right? How is it going to be likely? How is our side? Why do our side fulfill the principle of closure and deterrence and rehabilitation in itself? Firstly, though, I think their side will be harmful on the society and the prisoner in itself. When I think the idea of the closure in itself, that people will find more comfort in seeing the people that violate them, with people that hurt them in the first place, for example, suffer to get what they've done, to get screamed in the prison, for example, to get what they actually proportionate amount of harm that they've done to them in the first place. This is basically how you pay for mistakes in the first place. This does not happen in the proposition side of the house. But how will this manifest? Why is this really important? I think the essence of prison really don't exist in their side. I think the essence of the idea of the later please, the idea of rehabilitation, the idea of they said about retributive and restorative justice, for example, do not exist in their side. No mechanism outside of only giving the bio injection, for example. I think this will be very harmful because firstly, though, there's no fiat about how they will be act in the society. In example, how will you actually guarantee about how they will still going to follow the norm of society, and how will they get the stereotype, for example, how will get discriminated by the people, how will you actually ensure that they will not get separation, how will they not get to resort to more crimes. I think this will be gained more in our side because we actually bring the deterrence and the closure with the idea that rehabilitation, for example, and the prison that fulfill the manifestation in itself is still happening in this case. Later, please. But I think that even if there's going to be still prison in their case, but so what? I think the idea that there's no people that shouting at you, people that giving you inappropriate food, people that's no giving you the sense of giving you the proportionate amount of, for example, the harm that you've done to people in the first place. I think this is when I think that even if it's going to be existing their side, the bio injection is still going to happen. People will still think like, oh, I'm nice. Oh, I'm actually being honest. So why am I actually being treated like this? Why am I actually giving inappropriate food? Why am I getting shouted, for example? I think it's still going to be contradictive with their. I think it's still going to be contradictive with the bio injection in itself. I think people will start to be getting more reliant and be having to overuse this over and over again. And the moment when you actually and the moment when you actually rely into the moral bio injection in yourself, the moment when you actually lose, the moment when you don't bring any benefits to the society, when you keep them in prison after all. Secondly, though, I think even if you are being more better, even if, yes, let's take the best scenario where they're actually getting out from the society with a more justified manner, for example, I think there's still no closure on the victims and prisoner itself, because as I've emphasized earlier, about how will you not feel safe, how will you not find comfort in seeing that people that sexually assault you, for example, the people that killed your child, the people that killed your neighbor, for example, and it existing in the society where you're become existing in your neighbors with the idea that they're still with the idea they're already being good, for example. I think there's no justifications on that. Even if they're going to be so, there's going to be stereotypes, it's going to be harmful. Society will be more toxic, will be dividing those people with them getting more bio injection and whatnot. It will be discrimination will still be happening in our side. At least in our side, the controversial is the idea that retributive and restorative justice will still happen. The idea that prison death sentence with the proportionate amount of harm will not happen. The fact that they don't actually provide the preemptive about how are they going to be proportionate harm. How are they going to be accountable for harm, for example, how are serial killers going to be punished not by only the bio injection itself, is that the fact that they will not solve the problem. No sense of guilt, no sense of, there's a sense of erasure from the past action in itself. They can't gain this from the bio injection itself. People, there's don't get the in the controversial are even it still exists in society, with the essence is still there, still easier to society, and with that reason, very, very proud to oppose.
And then let's stop for that speech. You will continue with the part public.
Oh, not very good. I'm audible, right? Okay. Start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Panels, imagine yourself the mother who lost a child to a criminal, to a murderer. Or imagine yourself the husband of a wife who someone murdered. Now, you live with the knowledge that that murderer has now escaped from prison or has served his time, and yet he is still capable of committing his crime. Or even you hear news of him committing the same crime again. Would you not feel threatened? Would you not feel you are not safe anymore because probably you testified in court against him or them, and now you are at risk of them taking a revenge against you? This is the current situation that a lot of people are in, and this is the world that's on-site opposition they tout, and they have not defended against this world at all. Now that, quick clarification on the very, very top of the speech then, we have to reiterate that this is a clean slate debate panels, meaning that the nature of with the nature of the motion itself, we feel the technology will work. However, then, let's take them at the best case. Let's take them at their case in that the technology has two scenarios here. Regarding price then, is price an issue or is it a non-issue? Firstly, price is a non-issue then. Very obviously and in very intuitive panels, the world is going to be way better because points given by proposition to you. As with the motion and the info slide itself, people will feel remorse, people will feel guilt, people will feel empathy and want to do better. But then let's take them at the best case scenario, and that price is an issue for these countries implementing these model bioenhancement methods then. Regardless of the quality of the machine or this technology itself, in developing countries, the system used might not be as good as say the United States or Finland, let's say, who are more developed, obviously. However, it still exists and helps in fixing people's morality regardless of the quality. Not only that, we feel that as a prerequisite then, this system works at the very, very least. We try to actually help these people. We try to actually validate these people's or these victims' concerns over side opposition who do not even try to attempt to fix these problems, these underlying problems of the CJS after people have served their sentences. What we mean later. What we mean then is that this technology will still work because first, clean slate debate, obviously, but second then, the state has the obligation to make sure that the technology works before implementing it statewide because the state the state has an obligation to ensure welfare for everyone regardless of their actions because everyone has that dignity. It is a human right. But moving on then, two rebuttals on top of my speech. Firstly, is in regards to how side opposition mischaracterize prisoners as being mostly morally good. No, we do not think so because the system of judicial review exists. What we mean is that people are mostly innocent until proven guilty. I.e., there's a very lengthy process of determining whether you are guilty or not. And even when you are proven to be guilty in one court, you can still appeal it to a higher court in order to get probably attempt to get your sentence revoked. So on both sides then, if you are a prisoner then, you are proven to be guilty, and this is the most likely case. But moving on then to my second rebuttal on how side opposition says that people or victims won't feel validated because once they feel harmed, they see these people doing good and they feel iffy or they feel wrong. No, this still exists on our side since we do not remove the retributive system, i.e. criminals are still punished within the system. They still go to prison. They still aren't provided food. They still aren't provided good food. They still aren't provided good bedding. They are still punished later. They are still punished by the system. What we do have on our side is that we implement these bioenhancement methods, in which case it works alongside in tandem with the retributive system. But then, even if people do not feel validated, we feel that it is worse on opposition side because people are likelier to repeat their actions on side opposition because they do not have this model bioenhancement. They do not have these machines or these enhancement systems or these bioinjections, as they want to play it, to help with fixing or to help with increasing their morality, their moral compass, in which case people are likelier to repeat offend. On our side, people are less likely, as proven by said props first speaker. But moving on then to my before I move on to my speech, I'll take that point. Okay, I'll move on to my speech then. On a set of proposition, we believe that the moral bioenhancement is going to increase the people's trust in the criminal justice system. First of all, the premise is simple then, panels. What is the goal of the criminal justice system? Obviously, it is to rehabilitate prisoners to make the victims who have been dealt badly by these prisoners or these criminals feel justified, feel validated in their concerns. However, and this is fulfilling what the state wants. What do states on countries want then? It is obviously less prisoners and criminals overall in their society, because stability from societal values aren't being infringed when these people aren't committing crimes or going against their state's values. And not only that, secondly then, the legitimacy of the government is further enforced because people feel safer from less repeat offenders and from knowing that people who have gone to prison are most likely going to come out better than before. Really quick analysis then on why this is on why this is the case then. People, after they go to prison on our side of the house, will go through this compulsory bio-injection or bio-enhancement program for their morality, in which case, after they finish their sentence or even during their sentence, they will start to realize, oh, what I've done before is bad. What I've done before is actually something wrong, and this is my punishment, and I deserve this punishment. So, following this line of statement, this line of thinking, then after they've served their sentences or even nearing the end of their sentences, they will obviously try to do better. They will obviously help other people. They will obviously try to make amends for their mistakes. Maybe even meet the victims and say they are sorry. Try to what's it called? Try to amend their mistakes by, for example, giving stuff to the victims or like helping the victims in their day-to-day life. This is what it looks like on our side. This is what it's going to be like here on our side, because these people now have a better moral compass. Even if they do not meet these victims directly and say sorry or do whatever, then they are still going to be likely. It is still going to be likely for them to help other people after they have served their sentences on our side of the house. Think, for example, public service or community service. But moving on then. Why is trust in the criminal justice system very, very important? Because the legitimacy of the government is determined by the people's trust in it, and also in the criminal justice system as an extension. People's trust in the government, what we mean is that people trust in the government to sanction offenders or criminals by imprisoning them. And this is how the state actually works. Because if people do not trust within the just criminal CJS or in the state, obviously they will take things and deal with matters by their own hands. Take, for example, vigilante justice, which is not sanctioned by the state, in which case the criminal justice system is going to be in ruins. People are going to endanger themselves to enact what their so-called justice is without any form of standards, and chaos in society will reach an all-time high. This is what it is going to look like on side opposition. And then not only that, the stability of nations, therefore, we have proven to you, hinges upon people's trust in the criminal justice system. How then is people's trust going to be increased on our side of the house? Firstly, people are less likely going to repeat offend. Because, take for example, whether they are morally good or whether they are justified, let's say crimes out of necessity in the very first place. Since their morality is going to be enhanced after going to prison, obviously, after they have served their time, then their sentences, then panels, they are less likely to repeat their previous offenses, as we've proven to you, right? But even if the crimes that they commit is out of necessity, let's say they are a mother of 4 and then they have no money, let's say, and then they are forced to steal, let's say, baby formula. But then obviously it is going to, first of all, be less likely, since after they go to prison, the criminal justice system is very neutral, regardless of whether or not your intentions is pure or not. After you have done something wrong, after you have done a guilty act, you will still be punished. But it is going to be less likely then, because they are less likely to have guilty intentions after going out of prison. Thus, people in society overall feel safer due to the lower crime rates from less repeat offenses. But then secondly, then let's talk about, let's say, the mafia or the cartel or people who generally dislike the state or the police. It is very obvious and intuitive. People are, after going to prison, they are going to come out a better people. The benefits that on our side of the house is that first, states are more stable as a whole, criminals are more likely to realize their wrongdoings and amend for their mistakes. Thus, less chaos is going to happen and less criminals are repeat offending. People feel safer. But secondly, then people's quality of life are way better because people feel safer now in our side of the house. Very proud to propose.
Thank you for the remark. Now, I'll move back to
just audible from this distance? Proposition is extremely worst case. They're only playing on the side where people cannot ever rehab inside of prison. And they're saying that all the CGS does is just harm them in prison and whatnot. They're completely ignoring the case where prison has lifted tens of thousands of Americans back into society, not as repeat offenders, but as only first-time offenders, and have constantly contributed to society better after they've gone to prison. They've also been extremely contradictory when they're saying that the CJS, the specific courts in which people are judged, are extremely good, and if they're not, you can even go to higher courts. But their first speaker said that the CJS is corruptive, right? At the end of the day, we don't understand their characterization, and we're going to move beyond that into our responses on side of proposition. Firstly, they're saying that there's going to be better morality on their side of the house. We think that it's going to be extremely unnatural, not exactly within the lines of human principles of utilitarianism or any sort of moral matrices that exist inside of status quo, because you're forcing it through moral bioenhancements, right? But secondly, we think that at the end of the day, even if it is going to be creating better morality, it's artificial, and at the end of the day, people are going to be stereotyping these exact prisoners as being only morally good based off of the fact that they can rely on these bioenhancements, right? But secondly, on their saying that there's going to be more trust in CJS. Firstly, we think this is completely irrelevant to the debates when we told you specifically that we're going to be talking about these people who are needing closure, or these victims who are going to be going inside of society. But even if we say that trust inside of CJS is important, we think it's symmetric on both sides of the house, because we don't think that corruption is not going to happen on their side. But we also don't think at the end of the day, our side is going to be completely losing trust in CJS just because we're not able to make them rehab. First of all, that we are going to make them rehab, but secondly, even if they go out in society, they're going to be more natural, right? But thirdly, we think it's actually worse on government, because at the end of the day, the stereotype that's going to be going into society is that the CJS is completely dependent on these exact moral bioenhancement. They cannot ever think of any metric in order to rehab people other than these moral bioenhancements, and therefore the CJS is literally all about this at the end of the day, right? But even if we take them at the worst case on our worst case scenario, which is the fact of repeat offenders, 4 different layers of response. We think at the end of the day, repeat offenders are still going to have this specific moment of clarity where they're going to have guilt after spending 3 years in prison, and they don't want to actually commit this crime again. But secondly, even if they do want to commit this crime after they get out of prison, they're still going to be on probation, right? Therefore, they're going to be still people who are going to be taking an eye on them. But thirdly, there's still going to be societal check and balance, because there's going to be a name under them who are going to be like, oh, I have to specifically be aware of this person, right? There's already a name under them. But fourthly, even if they are still going to be committing this crime, exactly going to prison for a second time is going to be extremely worse, because they have a history, and therefore they have to be put in a worse prison, which is going to make them think about it even worse, and therefore they're going to be going into society with a much better outlook on life after their second time in prison, right? But fourthly, on their points of guilt, we're going to flip this argument in its entirety, right? We think at the end of the day, it's going to be creating this sort of extreme guilt. Let's say you're a psychopath, for example, and you kill somebody there, and afterwards you go into prison and you take this moral bioenhancement. What you're going to be thinking is, oh, I was such a terrible person. Why do I still deserve to live at the end of the day? I've already contributed so bad to society, and therefore, why am I still here, right? I might harm somebody at the end of the day, right? But even if this doesn't happen on side proposition, even if we take them at their best case, we think it's still symmetric on our side of the house, because prison is going to be good for most or not morally correct offenders, but even for those little symmetric, even for these little percentage of psychopaths, we're still able to put them in mental institutions, which are going to be able to rehab them in the extreme. We're going to be talking about this in our reframing, which is we're going to be giving you 3 points of reframing in this debate to make things clear. First of all, who are these prisoners that we're talking about? We've already told you in our first speaker that they're mostly doing crime out of necessity, right? It's not like you're going into prison just because you are morally challenged. For example, like you have to sell drugs because you're poor, or you have to go into the illegal market. If you're morally correct, then there's no need for you to be morally injected, right? But secondly, they're said that it's going to be good if you're going to, you're already morally challenged if you're already being judged by the CJS, right? We think at the end of the day, the CJS is still bad, and in the fact that you're not able to fully judge the mantria of these people, because it's based only specifically on objective truth. We'll take that.
Shouldn't the protecting status quo where CJS is something that's already in awareness and it's
This is a world reset debate, and therefore we're going to be taking this as a world reset on our side of the house as well. But secondly, even if we're going to be framing on these morally challenged people, these are extremely small percentage of people, right? They're very serial killers, and we think that the proof that these are actually a very small percentage is that whenever these crimes are committed, they're always shown on the media. We believe that at the end of the day, this is because they're rare, right? Exactly because they're rare, they're very small percentage, and therefore it's actually inherently, you need to show it in the media. Therefore, it's very small, right? But even if they are big, you can still create artificial sort of morality. We'll talk about this later. Secondly, on the framing on CJS, we think at the end of the day, they're already fulfilling their job, and the repeat offenders are very, very small. We think that they had to turn to Japan and very small cases, which is actually based off of externalities, which is the culture of Japan being so depressing, being so hustle culture at the end of the day, which is going to be forcing them into creating some sort of escapism mechanism, right? That's what's happening on side propositions example. But we already told you in status quo, there is, for example, First Step in America, which brings tens of thousands of American rehab in prison and bringing them into places of church, bringing them to places of librarians inside of status quo. We're just protecting this at the very least. And we think that the burden of side proposition is to prove to you why it's still morally correct for you to give moral bioenhancement to people who are already morally correct without them being too guilty. And with their burden is also to prove to you why there is still closure on side people who are victims of these people, and it's still going to be achieved on their side of the house, right? But we also want a prerequisite entirety of side proposition's case, which is accessibility, which we explained in our POI, which was engaged on their second speaker, but they never gave us any likelihood, and they just fiat this, right? Let's not compete in the world reset, right? If we think that moral bioenhancement is expensive, that is to say, we'll take that actually.
We've proven uncomfortable at least contribute back to society after they finish the sentences. But as long as you do not have any
We already told you on first speaker how people are going to be rehabbed. We're going to be explaining more on that on our extensions. We think at the end of the day that these things are going to be expensive, right? Just look at how expensive they are in status quo. Injections, they're literally injections. If CRISPR is so expensive, then these should be as well. But even if these are accessible, we should take this fiat on our side of the house and say that this exact money that the government has to provide this towards people should be also in the direction of creating more better rehabilitations on our side of the house, better prisons, for example. At the end of the day, we're going to bring you a very short example of dependency. Let's not live in a truly delusional world. We told you how these exact things are going to be produced, and it's not going to be accessible, right? And therefore, it should be reliance of these prisoners towards it. They're going to be constantly injected, and they have to be based off those exact things at the end of the day, right? We think those are expensive, but even if the government, we think at the end of the day, these governments are going to be unable, but it's flipped on our side of the house, we're going to give you rehabilitation for 6 structural reasons. A, it's effective for the guilt and reconsideration that you give you when you're in prison and you have to be like, you're spending all of your time thinking about your previous actions, right? But secondly, it's efficient, which is the fact that you can actually give people parole and you can let them contribute to society earlier. But thirdly, it's vast because most people are morally correct, but B, it can actually artificially teach morally challenged people that these are the actual values in society. But D, these are the correct moral challenges. That is to say, it is tick for tack mentality and it is natural humanity rather than their side where they're giving only to moral bioenhancements, right? But E, it's a danger on psychopathic people. But F, if they want to counter rehabilitation, they have to counter all these above structural reasons. So proud to oppose.
Thank you. Thank you for the remark. Now I'm on the third cross speaker.
Am I audible from here? My pronouns are she, her. Since this is a debate, I hope that anything I said wouldn't be taken out of context, especially since this is a live stream. Thank you. That's it. I'm gonna start my speech in 3, 2, 1. the fact that in status quo, there are a lot of gangs who hate the police and believe that they go to jail for something that is wrong and that it's a structural issue and that is something that the government is at the fault for, that they're not at fault. When that is the case, we think that side opposition cannot simply just claim that the reason that everyone in the world is already morally correct and believes that this criminal justice system is something that is providing the best for society. When that is the goal of the criminal justice system and for a betterment of the world, then we proudly propose. But then after my speech, let's talk about how side proposition thinks that rehabilitation is something that's already effective in status quo. They give us several structural reasons. First of all, that guilt and feelings still happen in prison. First of all, we think that the feeling of guilt will first of all be more pushed on our side of the house when at least everyone is given bio enhancements and given the moral purpose, as opposed to in prison on their side of the house where people do not have the highest guarantee, or there are still chances of people not being or having the better moral compass. Then in terms of guilt, we win. Second of all, let's talk about how parole and contribution to society. On their side of the house, not everybody goes through parole and not everybody goes to contributive in society. Not everybody can choose to go to parole, and not everybody can be contributive to society once they exit. At least on our side of the house, there's a better push because now everyone has a better moral compass as opposed to on their side of the house, where even the guarantee of having better morals when exiting in the very first place was not given. On our side of the house, it is 100%. Third of all, they say that we can teach these people moral compasses as well. We think that teaching these people moral compasses is something that shouldn't be their main focus, because at the end of the day, on our side of the house, we still give people a moral compass at the end of the day. And third of all, in terms of natural humanity, when side opposition tries to conclude that they're giving these kinds of morality under the basis of natural humanity, we think it cannot stand simply on the basis that just because we're using biomedical movements doesn't mean it's something that's not human. When you're a human, you go to the doctor and you take these kinds of injections, you take these kinds of medicines. Why is that now different? That is no longer by natural humanity. Then in terms of the reason, all of the structural reasons they give to you on why rehabilitation is better on the side has been brought down. We prove to you it's now better on our side of the house. But then let's talk about, at the end of the day, let's explain to you how moral compass is something that gives you your better guilt and better activity at the end of the day. When someone has better morals, it means that everything they do is now going to be more centered on those good morals. And when good morals happen, it means that people will do good actions. They have more time to think about what they're doing and link it back to their mental health and how morality is something that is so good. And because of that, they will now have the lower chance of committing these kind of bad things or bad crimes that will then also put them at the end of the day in prison. And understand that the criminal justice system acquits and thinks things as crimes under the basis that this is something that, number one, is not in the state values, and second of all, is something that can harm the society. And due to that, we think that it is very reasonable for them to be called guilty. And because of that, we think that guiltiness and morality is something that's very connected. But then let's talk about the three clashes in this debate. And the second two clashes in this debate. Let's very first of all talk about protecting and fulfilling the victim, since this is something that side opposition really wants to push on their side of the house. Side opposition tells you that victims will feel like their perpetrators are still there and that the trauma will haunt them and whatnot. And we bite the bullet. We think that this also happens on side proposition side of the house, but then let's look at the difference of what we on side proposition give to you that they cannot. First of all, that it is something that it is number one, is that we stop or hinder these people from committing future crimes, at least on a higher level, as opposed to on their side of the house. Why? When we give people these morals, we've already proven to you that morals equals into these people committing better actions or having better way of thinking about their guilt, and ended up they will now no longer have a lower chance of committing these actions on their side of the house. There is no kind of guarantee for this. And second of all, it's also the fact that this victim now knows that this person has better morality and will no longer do it to other people or do it to them again, and this gives them better fulfillment and better sense of self and whatnot. And in terms of that, we already give you these kinds of impacts. Then panels, how should you weigh this? Let's weigh this on how these victims feels and who is most hurt and who has the most kind of trauma and who has the most kind of fear in their life. Then look at this on our side of the house, where people only have the trauma, but at least they have the things and the ideas that this will no longer harm them or have a lower chance of harming them. On their side of the house, there's no guarantee of that. I'll take your PI.
What would you say if both sides manage to give you morality? What side of morality is exclusive with your side?
I think the very basis of this debate is to give who will now give these people better morality on a higher chance, and at the end of the day, we have already proven to you up top my speech that rehabilitation is something that's very important on our side, and the fact that you have failed on side opposition is the why we support the world where this is a new way of proving how to give people better morality and teaching morals to people and understanding and proving that criminal justice system is giving something right and rehabilitating these people, which is the very principle of this debate. I think the very basis of the entire debate is also in terms of these kinds of principles of rehabilitation. And when we have proven rehabilitation up top of our speech, then we've already proven to you that rehabilitation happens more on our side of the house. We brought down all your structural reasons and prove why it's better on our side of the house. Then in terms of our third clash, we talk about the effectivity of CJS in both terms. Let's talk about it in two different perspectives. One, in terms of the prisoner's mental health itself, and second of all, in terms of the beliefs in terms of these criminal justice systems, and because that's something so important. Let's talk about the prisoner's mental health. Side opposition claims to you that these prisoners will now be able to feel extreme guilt on their side of the house, because when they feel extreme guilt, this will cause into something bad. Well, first of all, we don't understand how guilt itself can cause them to do bad actions. Because understand, panels, when you do something bad to your friend, when you do something and whatnot, you have a moral compass, at least better than someone who is likely to commit a crime. And then because of that, you feel this guilt. And when you feel this guilt, you understand that I did something bad, but at the end of the day, your core values still exist. No matter how much guilt you feel, it's completely unlikely that will completely drop all of your abilities on the earth and completely think and make your only focus on, well, how you are so guilty. And additionally, second point, the feeling of guiltiness is something very good, because now it makes you think about these actions and it makes you teach other people to never do these things again, and it shares the world to everyone, because now when you feel guilty, you don't want other people to feel this kind of pain. And when you don't want other people to feel this kind of pain, it also spreads these kinds of moral compasses in terms of whatnot. And I think on our side of the house, guiltiness is much better, and at the end of the day, guiltiness is not something bad like side opposition likes to claim. Additionally, when a victim feels guilty, it also helps in terms of fulfilling the victims, because a victim is much happier knowing that they've been harmed and that the people now feel guilty about that, because they need to know that this person is agreeing that I am wrong for doing these things. And we think that on our side of the house, this is something that's much, much more perpetuated, and due to that, it is much, much more effective. In terms of the prisoner mental health, we think that it also helps them, because now they also have the kind of moral compass and whatnot to be able to achieve a better life that they are more fulfilled with, because now they understand that what their actions and what they're doing is something that's better. And when that is the case, we think that a prisoner's mental health will be much better on our side of the house. The metrics are simple. It's which prisoner is then happier, which prisoner is able to live more content with themselves, and we, at the end of the day, believe that what is more content is when these people are able to feel this kind of guilt, be able to spread the awareness, and at the end of the day, these people will still be able to understand that they're good actions and they can commit good actions to be able to succumb over that. And overall, let's talk about the last thing, about the belief of this criminal justice system. The belief inside of the criminal justice system is something very important in this debate, because when you as a criminal justice system want to enact your flaws and want people to trust you, so this world will have a better laws that keeps the world in better order, we think the importance of the criminal justice system and people believing it is much important. We bring this about corruption and about how the systemic issues is much, much more believable. Let's understand that there's a difference between corruption and people break corruption to enter and become a law offender. For example, when you commit tax evasion, and there's a difference when you try to exit the system or try to get out of the system in the very first place once you enter prison. We think that on our side of the house, at least when people get these bio enhancements in the very first place, these people will no longer commit corruption. Sure, maybe there are people who are going to get out of the system, but this happens on both of the sides. But at least on our side of the house, the people who are able to, do these bad things will at the end of the day be convicted. And when that happens, it means that then everyone will trust the criminal justice system, because it's more effective on our side of the house as opposed to on their side of the house. Due to that, I've never been prouder to propose.
Another topic that Marta and another speaker substantive part of the debate.
Panels, imagine your child being claimed and accused of corruption by the news that externalized in society, for example, that is really too glorified in society, right? Because let's take a look on the examples of this corruption, where there is 100 of trillions corruption, which in reality is just like millions of dollars, for example. But you have to be accused of the destructive or the environmental, and you have to be responsible for the other metrics, right? So far and so forth. Which at the very beginning with, it was a mistake of data input, for example, because of the lack of the administration itself, for example, that they're already responsible at the very beginning with, right? But what do they need is to be, what do they need is actually a closure and something that is going to create their character development, not something that is bio enhancement that will create their morality, that will make them to be altruistic, for example, right? Because that is their side of the house. They proves that the whole cases is just the only way to solve is just by giving them this bio enhancement, just by giving this injection, which at the very beginning with is not relevant, which all of the crimes exist inside it, right? Because their whole cases, they already feel what exactly the principle of justice system itself, but secondly also the morality, because we don't think that moral is moral is not altruism, right? But third of all, they feel on characterize how the society will react perhaps. Okay, secondly, we think that this is a world reset, hence all of their cases of comparatively is actually delusional. Yes.
Info set already gives you that it is a moral enhancement. Altruism is not inherently moral based on the info set.
Yes, but all of your cases talking about those morality, which they're just being honest, they're just being altruism and etc. That it is you just said in your speech that all of this is actually a fire. There will be no repeating the same mistakes over and over again, right? There is not fire, right? Because panels, this is their mechanism. Their mechanism. Every country able to have this bio enhancement is actually still questionable under two reasons. First of all, we still don't understand is it going to be cheap or expensive, right? But secondly, we still don't understand which it is going to be permanent or temporary, right? Temporary, right? Because this never answered by all of those speakers, right? Moving on to my clashes, then there will be three clashes here. First of all, on the principle of criminal justice system. Secondly, the impact towards the country itself, and third of all, on the society reaction. First point of clashes, then. Okay, the examples on perpetrator doing the same crime over and over again is too jumpy, because why not suddenly after they consume or they get the injection from this bio enhancement, they will fully understand their previous crime is so bad and they will not do it again. Where is the likelihood, facts, right? Because they just flagging that they are going to create death runs, they're going to create this sense of guilty with no further explanation, right? Because what is the process panels? Why consuming an organic injection bio enhancement will suddenly give them a sense of death runs? But even if they already explained before panels, we think that it is untrue. Because do you think that death runs itself is just going to be accessible when you already experience the responsibility of your crime itself, right? Because you have to be accountable for this crime at the very beginning with. But secondly, they also create they say that they also want to create the sense of guilty itself after committing crimes. Panels, we already POI, right? First of all, because the only reason that they put is that after consuming they will have more moral capacity, right? It is not enough, panels, because guilty is not going to be directly comes to your mind, directly comes to your personality, for example, because it needs time for doing those self-reflection, self-evaluation, which is not going to exist under the rest of the house, right? Because this is just going to be exclusive after you are experiencing your punishment, right? Your presence of or rehabilitation, for example, right? But even if at the end of the day there will be sense of guilty under the rest of the house, we know that it is not going to be significant, because that sense of guilty is just because feeling of ashamed of worse of committing their crimes in front of public, for example, right? But even if it is going to be significant panels, we know that it is just a short term of guilty, because since their mechanization is that they never explain the long last of the bio enhancement at the very beginning, right? But third of all, they said that they want to refuse the trauma itself, right, panels? We think that it is already contradicted in their cases by saying that they want to create sense of afraid because they have to get the injection itself, and but they don't want to create this trauma itself, right? But even if yes, at the end of the day, it will create trauma, we think that it is exists on both sides of the house, right? But the parameter, the tipping point is that why our side is better, panels, because we already give the room or the space for this perpetrator for doing self-reflection, when in their side of the house they just suddenly force and it is mandatory for them to directly get the injection before reflecting, right? But fourthly, they also talk about teaching moral, right? We think that there is no logic, and this is just jumping logic panels, because in their side they are not teaching moral, because what they do is just giving instant injection, right? Okay, comparatively under our side of the house, we emphasize on why prison is one of the type of retribution and rehabilitation, right? Because the most important principle is two things. First of all, to give the closure, the sense of understanding and self of evaluation itself, and secondly, the deterrence, so that they don't want to go through the same prison twice, right? Because they already understand how terrible it is and how suffering it is, right? But the kind of okay. Secondly, we need a tipping point is that because we're able to not generalizing all of the crime to just one solution of this bio enhancement, right? Because we understand that there is prisoners that doing crime out of necessity and out of mistake, right? That's why we think that our punishment is going to be more relevant to change them, right? Because we prove to you on our DLO on the sustainability of the progressive criminal justice system. Because if they assume that every country have money, of course, when the government have money under ourselves the house, we are going to develop the quality of prisoners and rehabilitation itself. Hence, will be more intersectionality and adjust the need of the prisoner itself, right? Okay, second question on the impact towards the country. First of all, they're just to jumping logic by saying that there will be no crime at all in their country, right? Because first of all, there's no likelihood why something every prisoner will not do it again, right? But secondly, right, we already give them the sense of change of behavior under our
the relatives at the end of the day, right? We think there's no closure on their side of the house for all these three factions. We think we win for this debate, then we priority votes.
Thank you for replying. I'm going to have Prof. reply to
Okay, starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Panels, just to crystallize this a bit, right? Propositions problem identification from the very beginning has been very simple. Is that we want to improve the concept of CG. We want to improve the mechanization in CGS, i.e., we don't want there to be more repeat offenders because of multiple scenarios that we thought it would possibly happen because of people cheating the system, people with power, people with money doing that. But we also want people that actually committing very, very heinous crime to actually understand that the crimes that they created all stem from are actually super bad, and they want them to realize that our burden was simply to prove why it's exactly that with this technology, with the existence of this technology, that we are able to better the CGS under our side of the house. Our fiat is very clear. That means that we don't have to prove why is it exactly that it's so expensive. That why is it exactly that not everyone might be able to afford that, because clearly our side we're just to prove that why is it that the existence of this technology will help all of those many things, and we'll be able to improve the CGS under our side of the house. But then moving on to the two clashes of this in this debate. First is in terms of the necessity. Second is in terms of the practical benefits. First is that in terms of necessity, what we try to tell you is that when we want as proposition, we want to heighten the moral compass of these people. We want to make them understand like how bad their crimes. We want to, and that when we make them understand just how bad their crimes were, we make them gain that sense of like empathy, altruism, and stuff and whatnot. We get under our side of the world, we get prisoners who are likely to feel remorse. But then how did opposition respond to this? They try to tell that most people in their prisons probably are first world situation and did it out of necessity, and that they probably have like good moral compasses. But we have responded to you for two reasons. Firstly, we tell that this is absolute nonsense, because in prisons, obviously, they are criminals. They commit crime for a reason, like cases of fraud, cases of murder, sexual assault. These are all, it doesn't make a small percentage, because those are all equally make the percentage of the people in prison. But then even we try to respond to you in the best case scenario, well, even if the people who commit this is actually people who have good moral compasses, we tell that it's okay, even if they already have good moral compass in the first place, the injunction probably doesn't already matter, because it's not like you do anything harmful to their body or something. This is why we try to push you from the very beginning, right? But in terms of how did they respond to this was that, they said the contingency on this bio enhancement is just so bad. But then what we as proposition, we try to tell them, okay, there's literally no like analysis on why is it actually that this moral, that the contingency on this bio enhancement is so bad, insofar that we're able to prove to you why is it exactly that all the benefits that you get under our side of the house still stands. We try to tell how these will able to increase the moral compass of these of all the prisoners itself. We tell that you're able to get a better society. We tell of how you're able to get better people's quality in the life. And then move on then to the practical benefits. I think that what opposition tries to claim to you all of how under their side of the house, they're gonna likely get that sort of like closure and stuff that under other house. But how this is like their main benefit, right, of how they're able to protect victims and whatnot. But then how we as proposition has responded to this, we try to tell that no, because under their side of the house, it's likely that victims probably still feel very unsafe, because they probably have no idea, right, whether the perpetrators of their crime will still likely to commit their crime in the future. But then under our side of the house, you get this sort of like, you understand and you know totally that they will never ever commit the crime, because you know that their moral enhancement will be so much better. And this is the kind of closure that you'll likely get under proposition side. side of the house. So we would then argue that under our side of the house, closure is so much far better because victims know 100%. They know for sure that these perpetrators of their crime will likely not commit the same crime over and over again, which then leads them to all the benefits that we think is still so exclusive under our side of the house and that opposition cannot claim. Firstly, that it's in terms of the people's quality in their life, where we can assure you and we can guarantee that these prisoners, they won't commit the same crime over and over again. We think that they'll have those sort of like, whenever their moral compass is heightened and whatnot, we think that this will definitely improve the people's quality in life. But then second of all, we lower the rates of repeat offenders. But then third of all, we also increase people's trust in CGS because they now know that the CGS has all these kind of things that can ensure that criminals will not repeat offend. And that's why I'm proud to propose.
Congratulations on voting for the final round. Good luck for the decision in all. This is what we will do that.
Thanks for the debate.